There's one thing that America has historically always done well: entertainment. The movie industry here is one of the biggest in the world, and it's worth tens of billions of dollars every year. And there was a time when to watch one of these movies, you had to go to a cinema, purchase a ticket, and see it on the big screen.
You made that up?
Yes.
You never made that up.
Yes, I did.
Somebody must be.
But home entertainment changed all of that. The VHS boom in the 1970s meant you could now watch films from the comfort of your living room. And it meant pirating entertainment, sharing and copying movies had become cheaper and easier. Since then, advances in technology have brought much faster ways to do that. And when the World Wide Web came to people's homes, media, now in the form of digital data, could be copied at lightning rates and shared almost everywhere. Now, the industry tells us it's a free-for-all. To watch the very latest films over the internet, all you have to do is log on to a BitTorrent site like this one, click a button to start downloading, and after a short space of time, there you go, you get to watch the very latest Hollywood blockbusters without paying a single penny.
You have made me very desperate.
At the heart of this new reality is something revolutionary: the power to share information quickly and easily across the world without traditional boundaries or regulations. But that ability is constantly being eroded. This is not just about pirated entertainment. It's about how we live our lives in the digital age, and who gets to decide what we can and can't do. This is a story about control. In January 2012, two controversial pieces of legislation were making their way through Congress. SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and PIPA, the Protect Intellectual Property Act, were meant to crack down on the illegal sharing of digital media. The bills were drafted at the request of the content industry, Hollywood studios, and major record labels.
One of the things you're seeing, which is a byproduct of the digital age, is, frankly, it's much easier to steal and to profit from the hard work of others.
The MPAA, or Motion Picture Association of America, represents the business interests of Hollywood. It spends time and money trying to counteract those who say the industry is using copyright as an excuse to protect its revenues.
The focus is no longer on promoting science's useful arts. The focus is on just maximizing money, profits for the corporations that have those copyrights. And meanwhile, these intermediaries, the distributors and et cetera, are sucking off most of those revenues.
So certainly in a world where you've got a volatile, at best, economic climate, it's very important that we protect the products that those people make and protect the jobs that go into making those products.
RIAA and MPAA are two of the most powerful lobbies in the country. You look at over the last few years, they've been spending unprecedented, multi-million-dollar investments in what could be construed as legal bribery, campaign donations to folks that then push forward these exact laws that we're fighting against.
Much of that lobbying money ends up here in the US Congress, which has in return backed the content industry for decades. SOPA and PIPA are just the latest in a long line of anti-piracy legislation US politicians have passed since the 1990s. Initially, the bills were supported by more than 80 congressmen. We've come to speak to one of them.
The issue with SOPA is whether we're going to allow the wholesale theft of American work product. SOPA was an effort to combat that, to combat these foreign websites that are peddling stolen American IP.
Adam Schiff's California district contains some of the largest film studios in the US. And during his time in office, the content industry has consistently been one of his top donors.
I think there was a great deal of misinformation that went out during the SOPA debate. Would it mean that if anybody posted a pirated DVD on YouTube, that YouTube would come down, or Wikipedia would stop, or Google couldn't search anymore? I think those concerns were misplaced. I don't think the bill had that effect at all.
Anybody arguing that it wasn't as bad as it was either hasn't read the bill and doesn't understand what the enforcement clauses of that bill would have done to places that host user conversation, or they don't regard the restriction of user conversation as being a bad thing.
I could have a website, I might have thousands or millions of users on that website commenting on it. And if any one of them posted a link to copyrighted material, my site could be in jeopardy for being taken down through extra legal processes.
While a network of lobbyists were helping SOPA and PIPA win support in Washington, away from Capitol Hill, a much larger network of people connected by the World Wide Web started to come together in opposition to the bills.
I saw in the early fall of last year on Reddit, I saw this conversation coming together around SOPA and PIPA. These laws are awful. They're really well crafted. They've got dozens of co-signers from both parties. This looks like a bipartisan lock, and I thought, we're doomed. We're doomed.
Some of the seeds of discontent were spread from here. San Francisco is home to some of the biggest websites in the world, where people regularly share creative and educational content online. SOPA and PIPA would have required those organizations to heavily police their users for copyright infringement. In Wikipedia's case, more than 500 million of them. But in the middle of January, something unusual happened. A critical mass of users started requesting the websites to go dark in a stand against the bills. Wikipedia's participation in the SOPA blackout was actually user-generated. The decision was made through online discussions on the comments page of the website. But once that decision was reached, this office was a hive of activity as staffers tried to work out how to shut down the world's 5th largest website in the space of just 48 hours.
For us, it was a pretty big decision. We'd never done anything like this before, but it was a community decision. We had a huge vote within the community of what to do, and it was incredibly effective.
The online community of the popular site Reddit had already called for a blackout, spreading the idea of an internet-wide protest.
We try to stay as hands-off as possible, no matter what the issue is, but especially in something like politics. But this we felt was was a real threat to the business, and would have made it very difficult for us to continue operating. So it's almost like we didn't have a choice.
Within a 48-hour period, other major sites such as Wired, Mozilla, and WordPress had joined in. And finally, the multi-billion-dollar giant of the internet, Google, threw in its support.
It really shifted the dynamics. Then it became safe for all the other folks that really didn't like these laws but didn't want to be sort of the only people blacking out their site to join on.
Mainstream US news networks, largely owned by media conglomerates that supported SOPA and PIPA, had given little or no coverage to the bills up to this point.
Wikipedia shutting down for 24 hours tomorrow.
But with the biggest names on the internet about to go dark,
The Stop Online Privacy Act.
the whole world was now paying attention.
Wikipedia has shut down the English language version of its online encyclopedia.
New media on the web ran up against older school media in this case, including the company we work for.
On January the 18th, the largest online protest in US history took place. In the end, more than 100,000 websites joined the cause, many of them posting links urging people to call Congress to stop the bills from becoming law.
You had 15 million people petitioning Congress in 24 hours. And that's never happened before.
I was astonished. I mean, I study this stuff for a living, and I thought we were going to lose.
And Hollywood did not see this coming. They got rolled by the internet this week.
We weren't representing the interests of Silicon Valley. We weren't representing the interests of Hollywood. We were representing the interests of the users of the internet.
But I have never seen Congress move so far, so fast on just one day of protest as the way they did today.
And indeed, by the end of that day, it was clearly dead in the water.
SOPA and PIPA were effectively killed off. It was a great victory for those advocating for internet freedom. Online activism had won the day. But here in Washington, new bills were being drafted. The McCain Cybersecurity Act, CISPA, and the Lieberman Cybersecurity Bill, all with their own threats to freedom on the web. In the battle for control of the internet, online piracy isn't the only threat cited by the politicians. As the US economy and government become increasingly reliant on the web, the term cyber terrorism has soared to the top of the agenda for those charged with keeping America safe.
How vulnerable do you think the US is in terms of cyber attacks?
They are ongoing as we speak at this moment. They take a range of forms. Some are efforts to infiltrate and get information. Some are efforts to potentially bring down websites or attack infrastructure. So it is an enormous problem already and only bound to get worse if it's not addressed.
As a member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Schiff says he's given daily evidence of why lawmakers must push for tough cybersecurity regulation. But advocates for civil liberties say laws now under discussion could pose an even greater threat to the US, that the constitutional rights of every American are now at stake.
Well, right now there are two different structures for government spying, one for the criminal law and one for foreign intelligence and terrorism. And what they're proposing is to create a whole new third column for cybersecurity.
Michelle Richardson says authorities are asking for sweeping powers to access personal information online and to define cyber threats, both foreign and domestic, in very broad terms.
Whether you've done nothing criminal and you're not engaged with terrorism, and this will be the catch-all now for pretty much all bad actors on the internet.
We are anonymous.
In the political debate over greater regulation online, the most notorious cyber threat America supposedly faces isn't state-sponsored hackers launching attacks from Russia or China.
Anonymous.
It's an entity that has no face, no clear direction, and most famously, no name.
Attention, citizens of the world, we are anonymous.
And its exploits have grabbed the world's attention.
How much do you know about the group known as Anonymous?
I don't know how much I can discuss with you, but we're concerned certainly with any group that is violating the law and that is hacking into systems, public or private.
But you've heard of the group, and it's on the radar, for example, of the House Intelligence.
Well, I certainly have heard of the group, and I don't think I can go into more detail than that.
The online community known as Anonymous has been called everything from a domestic terrorist group to the Robin Hood of the internet.
They are hackers on steroids.
Since 2008, factions within it have hacked into government websites.
There are literally thousands of stolen passwords on that site.
Organized protests.
Treating the web like a real-life video game.
And launched digital attacks on entities they deemed a threat to an open and transparent society.
This time their target is an intelligence think tank.
Its image as an all-powerful group of elite hackers threatening global infrastructure has been cemented by media coverage.
Anonymous appears to be threatening to do more this week.
But those who are familiar with the roots of Anonymous have a very different take on its motivations.
So Anonymous is a group of people that came out of an image board called 4chan, which was bombastic and crazy and rude and had terrible imagery, but also had wonderful things in it. Mostly terrible, a little bit of wonderful.
They are simultaneously pranksters, political activists, internet theorists, meme generators.
And this kind of freedom to express was a core value. No matter how rude or offensive your expression was welcome within Anonymous.
I mean, it is such a fountain of overlapping and in some cases contradictory impulses that it's really hard to know how to talk about them as a coherent whole.
And so when things started kind of intruding on that freedom or that perception of freedom online, Anonymous became politicized by that process.
In early 2012, law enforcement agencies in Argentina, Spain, and Chile, and here in the US, launched a series of raids against targets linked with Anonymous. Many of those raids were coordinated from here, the headquarters of the FBI in Washington. Under Presidents Obama and Bush, this agency is one of several that's received millions of extra federal dollars to conduct operations against those considered cyber threats. With FBI agents now regularly surfing chat rooms on the hunt for Anonymous, we've come to ask why these kinds of arrests have become a priority.
Some people say they're just pranksters who are, doing quite benign things, that a lot of these attacks aren't really that serious.
Well, there's a victim to every attack. whether an attack is successful or not. If you go and try to attack some business, that business has to take some type of defensive posture, and it costs that business money to put up that defensive posture.
They're kind of painting Anonymous as this evil, incredibly powerful cyber gang that's going to take down infrastructure, which is a useful way of getting around the fact that nobody's actually done anything to secure the infrastructure.
I think we have a responsibility as a nation when we have criminals that are conducting attacks against us to try to prosecute them and take legal sanctions against them. All the technology and the zeros and ones and everything else that you use, still there's a human being sitting behind the computer that's doing this, and that's what we're trying to find.
Finding those people behind the computers isn't an easy task.
Okay, so right now I'm on an internet relay chat for Anonymous.
Anonymous operates mostly in internet relay chats, encrypted chat rooms where almost everyone blocks their IP addresses. I've logged onto one to see if a member would chat with fault lines about Anonymous operations and goals. Eventually, one that goes by the nickname Knowledge Us did start a conversation with me. Most of the people in these chat rooms would never meet in the real world, but Knowledge Us seemed keen to set the record straight on Anonymous. He finally agreed to meet us in person and to speak on camera on the condition that we hide his identity.
Anonymous is not a group, it's just an idea, it's a banner. We would gladly gather people, spread knowledge and awareness to get these people to open up their eyes and see what's going on in their own backyards.
Knowledge Us says that apart from a hardcore minority, most of those drawn to Anonymous are regular internet users concerned about levels of government control. The operations that have got the most support from the community are those that crashed websites like PayPal and MasterCard after those companies cut service to the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. But despite the fear that Anonymous stirs up in government and law enforcement circles, these were not sophisticated security breaches. And, as Knowledge Us explains, they weren't even necessarily illegal.
We do DDoS, which is a distributed denial of service.
What is that?
Will crash your website. It's a form of online protest.
In the most basic terms, he says, it's about getting thousands of like-minded people to overwhelm a website by requesting access all at the same time. Websites they view as a threat to internet freedom or transparency.
I think what links us more together and kind of unifies us is the fact that we somehow feel that we're being cheated as people.
But for the FBI, what links these people together is a potential threat that's only getting bigger.
I think any type of activity online can be considered a security threat because, as we said, the technology can be used for both good and for bad, and any type of activity that we see, even that smaller, less exciting type of criminal activity could be used as a bridge or a tool by anyone to facilitate some type of greater cyber attack.
When everything online can be defined as a potential threat, that means that anyone doing anything over the internet is now fair game for security surveillance. So whether you're on a home computer or using one of these, whatever you write, read, or listen to can now be monitored, analyzed, and recorded on a far greater scale than ever before. And on top of that, the companies providing internet service can now track all of that information to hand it over on request with very little oversight, so that US security agencies can now access all of that personal information without you ever knowing that they're doing it. One man has seen firsthand how the US government has abused this power. Thomas Drake is a former executive at the US National Security Agency, an intelligence arm of the Pentagon, which was at the forefront of domestic surveillance after 9/11.
Obama couldn't make any difference, then who can?
In late 2001, the Bush administration authorized the NSA to conduct a full-scale collection of electronic data on American citizens.
And now everything was fair game. Everything, electronically.
Drake says existing privacy and surveillance laws were completely bypassed. Warrants or subpoenas were no longer necessary.
My moment of truth was when he's telling me, we're the executive agent for this program, it's been approved by the White House, It's all legal, Tom. Don't ask any more questions. In that moment, I knew I could not remain silent, because for me to remain silent I would have been complicit and an accessory to a crime, the subversion of our own Constitution.
Eventually, Drake and a few other NSA whistleblowers leaked information to US newspapers exposing the NSA's fraud and abuse. The revelations caused an outcry, but Drake says such programs have continued across US government agencies.
How much information right now do you think is being stored or kept?
Trillions of transactions. Trillions. I mean, this is the reality. Remember, all this is done behind the scenes. Most people don't realize what is possible. Now, of course, many people say, hey, I've done nothing wrong, so it doesn't matter because I've done nothing wrong. The issue is not about doing nothing wrong. It's the fact, what can the government do in secret, anonymously, with the information it has about you?
After years of FBI surveillance and a long court battle, Drake is finally a free man. But it wasn't during the Bush years that he faced his toughest legal challenge.
The case actually went forward under the Obama administration. And so you get into this cognitive dissonance, to say it that way. You're hearing the words that sound great. On the other hand, you're seeing the actions of the Department of Justice, where now you're becoming an enemy of the state, and they're doing everything they can to put you away.
We will support a free and open internet, so individuals have the information to make up their own minds.
The Obama administration entered the White House with a promise for open government and calls for global protections against censorship.
When ideas are blocked, information deleted, conversations stifled, and people constrained in their choices, the internet is diminished for all of us.
But over the past 4 years, the administration has aggressively and covertly extended its power to control activity on the web. It's expanded secret online surveillance programs collecting personal data, and it's shut down thousands of websites in the US and around the world with little or no judicial review. While US politicians have publicly criticized countries like Iran or China for heavily suppressing or monitoring internet use in their countries, behind the scenes here in Washington, they've actually been working pretty hard to enact regulation which often doesn't look that different. Global treaties like ACTA, the Anti-Counterfeit Trade Agreement, which could seriously curb freedom of speech online, has been actively pushed by the Obama administration without public knowledge or input. All of this under the guise either of protecting the US economy or national security.
Where we're heading, unfortunately, is more towards a locked down system, where there's an intervention that happens that says you cannot use this application or this service or have this kind of conversation. And in that world where you need sort of a surveillance mechanism to sort of check all of that, it begins to look a lot more like the Tehrans or China's, and a lot less like what we envision the United States to look like.
The timing of the debate seems obvious. From Tunis to Cairo, from Madrid to Moscow, and from New York to Oakland, the freedom to share information online has been showing its power with actions in the real world. And for now, that power is in the hands of many, not just a few.
Digital activism is just activism. The internet is real life.
It's an argument about freedom of speech on a global scale.
Mathematically, there really isn't any difference on the internet between copyright violation and speech. So anything you do to restrict copyright violation is also a restriction on speech.
Whenever we've given people the opportunity to speak on a wider scale than they could previously, they have always taken it, often to the surprise and displeasure of existing governments or media companies, but they have always taken it.
When the internet is your main place where you express, where you gain community, where you have access to information, and where you can act in your own world, then internet freedom is just freedom.